Over the past few months, trade relations between the United States and Canada have experienced significant tensions due to imposed tariffs and subsequent retaliatory measures. Initially, this dispute centered around federal-level confrontations but has now expanded, with individual Canadian provinces implementing their own countermeasures, notably British Columbia. The conflict began on February 1st when President Donald Trump signed executive orders imposing a 25% tariff on all imports from Canada and Mexico, with a reduced 10% tariff on Canadian energy products. The justification given by the U.S. administration focused on addressing issues related to illegal immigration and drug trafficking, especially fentanyl, across the northern border. In response, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced retaliatory tariffs of 25% on U.S. goods valued at approximately $30 billion, targeting products such as beverages, appliances, apparel, motorcycles, and cosmetics. A temporary agreement was reached on February 3rd to delay tariffs by 1 month to facilitate negotiations. Canada committed to appointing a fentanyl czar and enhancing border security, while Mexico agreed to deploy additional troops. However, negotiations stalled, leading President Trump to confirm on March 3rd that tariffs would take effect immediately, stating no further negotiation was possible. This caused noticeable declines in U.S. stock markets, highlighting investors' concerns over potential economic disruptions. On March 4th, both countries imposed their respective tariffs. Shortly after, the U.S. announced a 30-day tariff delay for goods compliant with the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, covering roughly 38% of Canadian imports. Canada paused the expansion of its tariffs but maintained existing measures. Further tensions arose on March 12th, when the U.S. imposed additional tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, prompting Canada to retaliate again by imposing tariffs on $2.6 billion worth of additional U.S. goods starting March 13th. This trade war has now escalated beyond federal confrontations, with individual Canadian provinces implementing their own economic measures. Ontario and Quebec halted purchases and removed American alcoholic products from shelves, respectively. Quebec also launched a review of government contracts involving American businesses. Yukon similarly banned alcohol sales from the U.S. and reviewed business contracts, seeking further opportunities for economic retaliation. British Columbia emerged as a central figure by selectively banning alcohol imports from U.S. Republican-led states as part of broader economic countermeasures. In early March 2025, British Columbia introduced the Economic Stability Tariff Response Act, empowering the province to potentially implement tolls on U.S. commercial trucks transiting through its territory to Alaska, although the law does not immediately enforce these tolls. Alaskan officials quickly responded, expressing significant concerns about the potential economic impacts of these measures. The Alaska Trucking Association highlighted that tolls could dramatically increase transportation costs, disrupt supply chains, and raise consumer prices, as higher costs would likely be passed on directly to Alaskan consumers. Given that Alaska heavily relies on overland routes through Canada for timely delivery of essential goods, these tolls could severely disrupt supply chains. The Alaska Highway, a critical link used extensively by freight companies, provides essential connectivity for Alaskan communities to continental supply routes. Alternatives to this route, such as sea transportation, are limited in terms of speed and capacity, particularly for perishable and specialized cargo. The potential impacts on tourism could also be significant. Alaska's tourism industry heavily depends on Canadian routes, with thousands of tourists traveling annually through Canada. Any additional fees, delays, or disruptions could discourage travelers and impact the broader tourism economy. Similarly, Alaska's cruise industry, mandated by U.S. law to stop in Canadian ports, could face higher costs or logistical disruptions if British Columbia extends retaliatory measures to maritime traffic. Alaskan responses to British Columbia's toll proposal varied significantly. Governor Dunleavy took a diplomatic approach, emphasizing federal-level negotiations to resolve trade disputes and cautioning against provincial measures that could harm long-standing friendly relations. In contrast, Senator Sullivan adopted a more aggressive stance, threatening to push for cruise ships to bypass Canadian ports altogether, a measure temporarily adopted during the COVID-19 pandemic, which would significantly impact tourism revenues for British Columbia. Local Alaskan businesses and industry groups expressed strong opposition to the tolls, citing concerns about rising prices for essential goods and disruptions to established trade and tourism flows. The transportation sector, particularly trucking companies, warned of increased costs that would inevitably impact Alaskan consumers. Moreover, implementing these tolls could introduce logistical complexities, requiring British Columbia to establish extensive toll infrastructure. This could inadvertently affect tourism, as RV caravans and road travelers might face delays, potentially dampening cross-border tourism activity. The interconnectedness of U.S. and Canadian economies, especially between Alaska and British Columbia, highlights the vulnerabilities created by such trade tensions. The interdependency underscores the critical need for collaborative conflict resolution at the federal level to avoid long-term economic harm. As the situation continues to unfold, it serves as a stark reminder of how international economic disagreements, even among traditionally friendly nations, can rapidly escalate to impact local communities profoundly. Both U.S. and Canadian officials face pressure to negotiate sustainable resolutions to prevent further economic disruptions and maintain the long-standing positive relationship between these neighboring countries.